Welcome back, my beautiful people. This is part two of my 7-part series regarding starting a short-term rental business. So today we're going to be talking about the legal and regulatory issues or compliance that you need to be aware of when you start your company. So the first thing you need to do is research your local regulation. What I mean by that is you need to make sure that you're compliant both with the state, county, and municipal. Each one may have a different rule or regulation or ordinance regarding two very important components of this business, of the property management side and of the rental side. You got to make sure that you are in compliance with both. So for example, in Florida, if you are a property manager, depending on the amount of properties you're managing, you may be required to have a property management license. Florida, also, if you're going to be doing leases, you're going to be required to have a real estate license to write out a lease. And those are two licenses right off the bat that you need to get if you're going to start this business. There's also going to be some licensing requirements for the actual property, but I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. But the point here, first thing you need to do is research all regulations that regulate both property management and short-term rental. Step two is going to be to form your business entity. Now, your business entity could be an LLC, corporation, but you need to decide what type of entity you're going to operate under. Step three is when you decide what type of entity and have your name for your business, then you need to register that business. Typically, you're going to do that by obtaining a business license or permit with your local municipality, but there's areas like in Florida, you have to get your business registered with the state. Florida's called SunBiz. Some other places, you may not have to do that with the state. You just have to do it with your county or with your municipality. But the point is, you're going to have to register your business name. You just have to figure out how to do that and where to go to do it. Next, once you have your business registered, then you need to obtain a business tax ID. For example, with the federal government or with the federal employment identification number, which is your EIN number, you apply to get that number through the IRS. Once you have that number is going to allow you to open up a business banking account or a business savings account. The point here is that number will allow you to open up a bank account you're going to need under the business name, but you're going to need that EIN number. The EIN number is also going to be important when you file your tax. Step number 5 is going to get your insurance coverage. Now, when it comes to insurance, you need to get it. It's going to be different types of insurance, but basically you need a general liability insurance, property insurance if you own the property, and some professional liability insurance like errors and omission type insurance. Very important that you get this insurance. For example, in Florida, without having errors and omission liability insurance, you're not going to be able to get licensed as a real estate agent and or as a property manager. So you need to make sure that you have those licenses in place. Step number 3 is compliance with rental laws. Now, those rental laws, again, they can be state, they can be county, or they can be municipal. But a lot of cities, a lot of counties, there are some states that are going to require you to register the property that you're going to be renting. You're going to have to get and obtain a certificate of occupancy in a lot of places. So you need to register that property with whatever agency or government entity that's going to require it, but you need to do your research with that. The next is going to be the safety and building code compliance. Again, this relates to the actual property itself, but if you're going to manage a property, I highly recommend that even if to get it licensed as a short-term rental, it doesn't require you get an inspection, which I highly doubt. If it requires a license, I am guarantee you're going to have to get it inspected by either the city building code enforcement or the county. You're going to have to get it inspected. But even if it doesn't require, even if you don't require to get property itself licensed to rent it as a short-term rental, I highly recommend you do it anyway. It's just going to protect you if there's any issues or anything that happens later on, you will be protected. So get that property inspected. The next thing is licensing, but some jurisdictions are going to require that you as a property manager that you get licensed. Figure out if that's going to be the case in your area. For example, in Florida, if you're managing more than 10 properties, you're going to have to get a property management license. Also, if you're managing HOA, you need to get a CAM license. There's going to be some requirements regarding to in reference to and regarding property managers, but you need to do your research and make sure that you are compliant as a property manager, especially if you're managing other people's property. Next is going to be reviewing the platform requirement. Now, this part is kind of easy because all you have to do is follow the step-by-step requirement. But for example, with Airbnb, a lot of people forget that in order for you to get paid, you have to submit your tax information. I know when I first registered my property, it didn't take me to anywhere to get paid out and where to submit my tax information. I think now they kind of do it. It does show up. You have to submit your tax information. But today also there's some new requirements. For example, you're going to have to confirm and certify that your properties do not have the following: do not have cameras on the interior of the property and or listening devices on the interior of the property. The point here is that just make sure you review everything in terms of the requirements for each platform, because each platform may have a different requirement because you want to be in compliance, because you want to get paid, right? Then this is a given, but some people forget. Make sure that when you register your property and you get your licensing, make sure that you write down and put a reminder of when the renewals are up, because it's going to be different. I'm going to give you an example. When my real estate license gets renewed, different time frame than when my short-term rental properties get renewed, and it's a different time frame when I get my license as a short-term rental operator. That's a different time frame. So just make sure you're on top of that and make sure you put reminders when that stuff is coming up so that you renew it on time and you don't get penalized, because oftentimes, especially in some cities, if your license is expired, you're gonna have to take your property off the platform, cannot rent it until you're back compliant. Sometimes that stuff doesn't happen overnight, so make sure you're on top of that. The last thing I'm gonna talk about is the following. I highly recommend you hire an attorney to go over a lot of the stuff that I just talked about, but in particular, hire an attorney for them to sit down with you so that you can write out your management agreement. Also, hire an attorney so that you can write out your leases. There are some standard leases. As a real estate agent, you're going to have some standard lease agreements within your portfolio. But understand, these standard lease agreements oftentimes are not related to short-term rental. You're in a different category. So I highly recommend that you get with an attorney to write out a short-term rental leasing agreement so that you're compliant. Here's why this is very important. Unlike long-term leases that are governed by landlord-tenant law, short-term rental agreements are not. So you have, one of the reasons why I like being a short-term rental operator and why I don't do long-term leases is because the power of that property goes to you. When it's a long-term lease and you have a long-term tenant, in some states, some cities, and some counties, the power goes to the tenant. There's some laws that benefits them. The word that I'm looking for escapes me right now. But the law favors them. It protects the tenant. It doesn't protect you, the landlord. So as a short-term rental operator, you want to make it clear that their stay in your property is just that, short-term and temporary, that they're not a long-term or month-to-month tenant. Because once you do that, then you fall under the landlord-tenant laws, and if you have to evict someone, it becomes very difficult because you have to go through the eviction process. Whereas a short-term rental operator, you don't have to do that. I highly recommend that you hire an attorney for that. The next thing that you should hire is a financial professional, like an accountant and bookkeeper, to make sure that your bookkeeping is up to date and make sure that you're filing your taxes and taking advantage of all the benefits you get as a business owner. Right? So very important you get that. The last professional that you should hire if you're new to this is a short-term rental management professional. A company like ours, or someone that's been in the business for a long time that can mentor you and guide you so that you don't make the mistakes that a lot of people make when they start out in this business. A lot of people will say, well, I don't have the money for that. I'm going to tell you is this: you don't have the money not to do that, because you're going to lose a lot of money making a lot of mistakes if you don't hire a professional in the three categories that I just mentioned, right? You don't hire an attorney, you don't hire an accountant, and you don't hire a mentor. You're going to make mistakes, and in the long run, it's going to cost you more than if you paid that up front. Anyway, my beautiful people, hope this information was useful. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, follow me on Instagram, buy me a coffee if you want to sit down and talk about this in more detail. If you want to hire us, please either DM me or send us an email. The information's below. Love you guys. See you in the next one.